The other thing I want to talk about while I have a moment, and I might post these separately, because I have to take the opportunities while I can get them, make them when you can, post them when you can't. That's my motto. And I want to kind of reiterate what I said in my last video where I had to practically whisper. And, when I was talking about how, the Rugrats, I mean, the Landover Baptist thing, and I mean, of course, I don't think that's an actual Baptist church. I'm pretty sure it's a parody website, or it's a website making fun of Baptist, by presenting, beliefs and commentaries on things that are just too extreme, even more than what they would ever say, and also getting a lot of facts wrong. Like if you read other articles, I mean, it's more obvious. I mean, the Rugrats one was funny because of how true it actually is. You know what I'm saying? It's funny because, I mean, they told so much truth, even though they were, kind of making fun of Baptist. I mean, they ended up telling a lot of truth about the show, and that's why it's funny. And I've actually found things, like I said, even more disturbing in the years since then. But I think I discovered that around 2007 or 8 when I became obsessed with Pastor Anderson. And like I said, I mean, I do believe I may have been saved that year. Um, a lot changed in my life in 2008. You know, a lot of things changed. Yeah, and I don't know, that could be coincidence, but I really do think I got saved. And I was like craving knowledge. I'm the kind of person, as I've talked about before, it's like I can something previously unknown quickly becomes an obsession. And then once I discover it, it's like I just can't get enough knowledge. I just can't stop. Once I discover something that piques my interest. And so once I found Pastor Anderson, and he had so much to say about so many things, and it was so true. But it's like I wanted his commentary on other things that he hadn't made videos about, and that I knew that he wouldn't like or approve of. And Rugrats was one of those things. It's like I would have loved to have heard a sermon, a Steven Anderson sermon about Rugrats, specifically addressing that show. Not just children's media in general, not just, shows like it or cartoons or, not just the things that I know pertain to the show, but the show in and of itself. And I've always wanted to hear, what a true, Christian person, I've always wanted to hear like a more in depth discussion of what's wrong with it, more than just, well, they whine a lot. Well, I don't want my kids learning bad behaviors. I mean, I just don't like it. It's just annoying. No, I want to hear somebody actually sit and just rip the show apart and I would just love to hear a fire and brimstone sermon about that show in particular, naming the names, specifically that show, and that's exactly what I found. When I typed certain keywords, I think it was around 2008 that I found this 10-year-old, article or whatever it was on that website, which no longer posts. I think their last entry might have been not long after that. But, I mean, some of it's just silly, like the boys don't cry thing, which that was one of the few movies, the first movie I ever watched where I'm like, wow, finally someone who looks like me in the leading role. And, but saying that Ellen DeGeneres was in Boys Don't Cry, that's not true. That's factually incorrect. It was Hilary Swank. And, so they get a lot of things wrong. And that's what I did, with my version of the article about Rugrats, was I corrected a lot of what they got wrong. And I omitted some things that were just, I thought, a little bit over the top. Like what they said about Susie. I took that one out, that little part out, because I felt like that might come across as racist. And the point in my mind is not to be racist, but to criticize the show from a Christian standpoint. You know what I'm saying? It's not to be ridiculous. It's to, in my mind, I'd like to hear the show criticized, for being a children's show, with so many things that are just wrong on so many levels that I didn't even have the words to convey, when I was younger. And so, they get a lot of things wrong on that site, and probably a few articles have been removed. But I mean, I realize it's not a real site, a real church. But it's just kind of filled that need that I felt to hear from the true fundamental Baptist perspective. Why Rugrats is wrong, not just it's another annoying kids show. Oh, it's not the best thing your kids could be watching. Oh, it's not about Jesus. So, I'd rather my kids watch a show about Jesus. Well, no, I want to hear that it is terrible. It's disgusting. I'd like to destroy the people that made it. Death is too good for the people that made it. That kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? That the people that made it are Romans 1 people. That kind of thing. That's what I'd like to hear. From a preacher, not just, I happen not to let my kids watch it because there are better things that they could be watching, or there are better things that they could be doing. Well, there's always something better to do than watch the stupid TV. I don't care what's on it. It's always better to be doing something that doesn't involve staring at a screen. But, no, I've always wanted to hear, someone criticize it, actually, because it looks like the people that are opposed to it, it's almost like they would rather you think they don't know anything about it. You know what I'm saying? Like Pastor Anderson, as I've stated before, he probably would rather you think he's never even heard of Rugrats, because it's like the people that truly feel that way are just ashamed to even know anything at all about it. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to even, it's so bad that they don't want to touch it. They don't want to go near the subject, because it's like if they critique it the way that I have, and the way that this Landover Baptist site has, it's almost like well, why do you know so much about it? It's almost like, in order to come across as sincerely, having the Baptist beliefs, you almost have to pretend not to know anything about it, because if you do, it's like you're too backslidden to actually believe what you claim to believe. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't want to get close enough to the show and the subject, to truly comment on it. It's kind of like off limits. If you know, you know, but it's like you don't want to admit that you know and why. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I've kind of hoped to do for, 6 years now? Holy crap, this whole pandemic thing 6 years ago. 6 years of my life have not been the same as before. But that's kind of what I'm hoping to do, is be that one person, that one niche person out there that's close enough to it, but yet removed enough from it to actually say these things. You know what I'm saying? Because not many people have my knowledge of the show, but also my religious beliefs and convictions. You know what I'm saying? Most people, that are truly, like diehard fundamental Baptist, would just have never watched as much of it as I did. People that grew up in such a home, their parents probably didn't allow them to watch it, and they don't know why. But, people that know as much as I know about the show are usually not saved and not Baptist, or might even be that Christ-rejecting religion of the people on the show. And by the way, just because Tommy's mom, is she's the only one known to be of that faith, so to speak, does not mean that Stu and other characters are Christian. You know what I'm saying? Just because the other characters on the show are not proclaiming to be that religion, that does not mean that Stu or Drew or even the grandpa or the people that they married, you know what I'm saying, like Charlotte and Chaz Finster and the Devil or DeVille family. It doesn't mean that those other characters on the show are Christian. You know what I'm saying? And certainly not Christian by my definition. You know what I'm saying? They're not fundamental Baptist, King James only. You know what I'm saying? Because he would have never married such a woman were he that. They're not Stephen L. Anderson Christian. They're not, First Baptist Church, like I am Baptist do or die kind of Christian. So they're not, just because they're not explicitly, wearing a yarmulke and all that, that does not mean that they are Christian. You know what I'm saying? They're not Baptist. I mean, they could be atheists for all we know. And just because somebody puts up a Christmas tree does not make them a Christian necessarily. So, I mean, the whole show, I don't approve of it. I never should have. I mean, really, I don't know why it became an obsession. I guess it was just there to fill a void, left by some worse obsessions. And it was all that my sister wanted to watch on TV practically, that and the other Nickelodeon shows. But, so yeah, I mean, I do not approve of that show. Would never recommend it to someone with a child. That's the most infuriating part of all, is that it's on there for children, and that the people that want to make content for children are these types of snakes in the grass or creeps that, they would like to, they can't do it in an overt way, but they want to use subtle, covert, subliminal messages, to try to, how would you say, erode their sense of values. You know what I'm saying? Like things that people may have accepted, it may even be in the Bible, like the boys should have short hair, or at least shorter than the girls around them. You know what I'm saying? That boys should be as different from girls as humanly possible. Well, they can't just come out and say that that's wrong, or they would like you not to feel that way as a little boy. But they can have, male characters on a show that do things that really make you question their masculinity. And it's not just that show, but, lots of other shows, lots and lots and lots of other shows. Pretty much all of them to some degree, in various ways, had male characters whose masculinity made you scratch your head. Rarely, were any of them like, just a typical guy through and through. They may have had short hair, but they were effeminate in other ways, and so on. So, they just, they want to chip away, because you see, you don't really have to try that hard to convince girls that they should question femininity. You know what I'm saying? I mean, girls just naturally kind of all think we've been duped. You know what I'm saying? We can just look at our moms and how hard their lives are, compared to our dads, and just know that femininity kind of sucks, and, we shouldn't be expected to perform it 100%. But, convincing boys to reject masculinity or hypermasculinity, when there's literally nothing to gain as a male by being closer to a female, you know what I'm saying? More feminine does not get you anything positive as a man. It's harder to do that. And so that's what a lot of these cartoons were. They're directed primarily at boys. They're aimed at boys. Hence all the action and the disgusting jokes about farting and pooping. They're primarily aimed at boys. To try to get them to doubt, that masculinity is 100% good, or even what it is. You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, if you can still get a girlfriend wearing purple and, showing so much of your body, and, having your hair kind of grown out a little bit, then why do you have to be, the perfect picture of masculine? So, yeah. Go ahead and post this video. Oh yeah, I wanted to say, so it's like they just really like to confuse kids, and that's why I would never. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like the worst stuff on television, like Pastor Anderson said, is what's on there for kids, because they think, that as long as it goes over the kid's head, as long as they don't just come out and, say the F word or whatnot, that it's okay, that it doesn't really matter, because they're kids and they don't understand things at a deeper level. And so they think, that as long as it's just completely unknown to them how something is dirty or nasty, that it's okay to put that in children's media. And it's like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. The thing about the Pickles surname, that's not a real last name that people have, but that never would have crossed my mind, that it was a euphemism for male genitalia, because I never used it that way. But then once I read that thing on that site, it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And like auto rocket, that certainly is a euphemism. And so I believe that that was intentional as well. And that a lot of these stupid names, that they gave these characters were intentionally nasty in a subliminal way. They went out of their way to, and like the character's name spelling scat, it'd have been too obvious if it had been like a more obvious cuss word, like Ilsa could be put in there, and Taffy, if it wasn't the kids. But if it was, it's like a dirty word that kids don't understand why it's dirty. And then I was kind of thinking, is that just coincidental? What are the odds of that? Because, if you know a lot of people, you can probably think of 4 people whose initials would spell that. But then I thought and thought and thought, and no, it really isn't. Most other shows do not have 4 main characters whose initials would spell scat or cats or whatever else you could spell. And I was thinking about it, and it's not just those characters. You have multiples of those letters. So while it might be coincidental if it was just one character with each letter, no. You could exchange, instead of Susie, you could have Stu or Spike. Instead of Chucky, you could have Chaz or Charlotte. Instead of Angelica, guess what her dad's real name is? Guess what Drew's real name is? It's Andrew. So instead of Angelica, you could have Andrew. Instead of Tommy, you could have any one of the McNulty boys, or Taffy, even though that's a nickname. So, it's not just the 4 main characters, it's several other characters could also spell that. So yeah, I definitely look back on it and think that everything, the more you learn, the more you realize that it's not a good show for kids. It really isn't. And it's infuriating that for so long, it was treated as though it was. There were always those people, those Christian teachers that I look down upon for not letting their kids watch it. But it's just amazing how I look back on that and now I understand where those people were coming from. All those boomers and Gen Xers that didn't really like the show and didn't want their kids to watch it. And now I understand. It's like, oh my God, how could I not see that? And I feel like my mom sort of was starting to realize it there at the end when it just became so obvious that the show discontinued. But by that point, it's like she wasn't really worried about it, because my sister was getting older and not as much into it. And I was an adult and she'd never been into it. But yeah, it's like she never would tell me, she just saw the trailer of that 3rd movie and she said it looked like crap, and she would never elaborate on why. And now I understand. It's like, you could almost just watch the trailer and get from it what I did. You know what I'm saying? That nobody wants to accept or acknowledge. It was all about sexualizing that one character and her bodily functions. Anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together could have concluded that. By the way she was dressed, by the way she was acting, by the way she was eating, by the level of action after she was eating, by the fact that they put these kids on a deserted island with no bathrooms. You know, and once they sunk the convy, I mean, how would she use that bathroom either? You know? I mean, it's ridiculous to say with any certainty that I'm wrong. I mean, even if another character did it, you know what I'm saying? 3 plus 3 being 6 doesn't stop 2 plus 2 from being 4. So, yep. Tired of talking about that, and I'll go ahead and post this video.